All right, the cattle industry. Okay, out west, one of the biggest industries there was, the biggest industry there was the cattle industry, and that all came from a rising, skyrocketing actually demand for beef after the Civil War. So beef demand skyrockets after the Civil War with the development of the Chicago Union Stock Market, stockyard. Excuse me. This is where they would fatten up the cows. Chicago became the main processing center for U.S. beef. What really happened was, folks, the railroads. Okay, the railroads were spider webbing their way all throughout the country, but Chicago was in the center of not only the railroad trade, which made it the railroad hub, but it was also at the bottom of Lake Michigan, which means you could get goods in and out of the country through the Great Lakes and onto these railroads and distributed to the entire country through Chicago. That's why it was the fastest growing city in the world. Joseph McCoy transformed Abilene, Kansas into a major railhead for the Chisholm Trail. Joseph McCoy went as far south as you could and still catch the train, and he bought this area and he made a cattle town called Abilene. And he would pay cowboys more than any other person for their cows. So everybody wanted to get their cows to Abilene to get the maximum amount of profit. What Joseph McCoy did was he owned everything in the town. He built the town from scratch. So you want to come in from a long drive on the trail, you're going to get a shave, you're going to take a bath, you're going to get a meal, you're going to get a hotel room, you're going to get the company of a lady maybe for a price, you know what I'm talking about. You want to gamble, you want to drink. All these things you are doing them at Joseph McCoy's businesses. So yes, he pays more for the cows, but he also collects a huge sum back from the cowboys that were there to party. Okay, the decline of the cattle industry. Many things made the decline possible. Overproduction is one. Okay, cattle was big business, and like anything that's big business that everybody's making a profit on, more and more people are going to want to do it. So the more cows you have, the less the price is on them because they're less rare. So cattle goes from being $40 a head at the height to about $10 a head at the bottom. All right, weather. A severe drought in 1883 killed a lot of grass. That's one of the things. And a blizzard of 1887 bankrupted many ranchers. Joseph Glinton is the one that put the nail in the coffin of the Wild West, okay? There's all these different reasons about why the Wild West ended, but the most important is Joseph Glinton's invention of the product called barbed wire, okay? Barbed wire stopped the cattle drives. Instead of driving your cattle over 1,000 miles of open countryside, now every mile or so you have a barbed wire fence, and so you cannot, it's just not worth it to drive the cattle through 1,000 barbed wire fences. And it basically ended the open range, and it ended the cattle drives in the Wild West. All right, let's move on. We got settling of the West. We got the Homestead Act. Again, you get 160 free acres of land if an individual homesteaded for 5 years. We have the steel plow from John Deere, which didn't wear out as easily as wooden plows, or it didn't dull as fast as the iron plows. So it was made out of stainless steel. And we have the Harstron Mechanical Reaper by Cyrus McCormick. And barbed wire helped settlers to become Western homesteaders as well. It's a massive tool, folks. Barbed wire means you don't have to go out every day and collect your cows from all over creation. Okay? They stay in your field. 80% of Western homesteaders failed. Isolation was a major problem. By 1890, there was no clearly defined Western frontier in the United States. So this is the year, 1890 is the year where the Wild West was over. It was all conquered by Americans, and the Native Americans were all on their individual reservation plots. Railroads hurt farmers with high freight rates and storage fees. Since the railroad would come through your area, there's only need for one railroad to come through your town. And that means that that railroad has a monopoly on that part of the country. And they charged exorbitant rates for shipping your product, shipping your corn or your wheat or whatever it is. And so the farmers start to fight back, and they start to make new clubs that were against the railroads. All right. An emerging industrial giant, 1870 to 1920. After the Civil War, industrialization occurs. America is mostly a rural nation, but within 50 years, it will become the largest industrial nation in the world. This second industrial revolution involved improvements in transportation, like railroads, communication. We've got the telegraph, we've got the telephone, and business organization. We have the robber barons that are consolidating their powers into corporations and have monopolies, and they are making a killing during this time. Let's see, railroads brought new materials, raw materials into urban factories and finished products to consumers. The East Coast rapidly industrialized because of its access to European markets and the American heartland. So the thing was, y'all, as time went on, the cities grew bigger. As cities grew bigger, we put more factories into the cities. The more factories we had, the more jobs we had available. People came from all over the world to the American cities, and this makes the American cities the most diverse place on the planet, even till this day. Okay? All right. So moving on, transportation and communication. Okay? Our railroad mileage from 1870 to 1890 quadruples. It's 4 times. Imagine the railroad's like a big spider web, and the spider never keeps spinning his web. It just keeps on adding and putting little smaller lines in between, so that way the train can connect to different railroads. All right, railroads were financed by a land grant act of 1862, which provided huge land grants. Okay, so what they did is, for every mile of track that you laid, okay, you didn't have to get approval for the government about where to lay it or anything. You go out west, you lay a mile of track, the government's going to give you a mile of land on each side. And what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to sell some of that land, and you're supposed to use the money to add more railroad. And then the government gives you more land, and you sell some land, and you add more railroad. And so it's a self-financing spider web that is growing out of control all over the United States. The Central Pacific and the Union Pacific met at Promontory Point, Utah in 1869, creating the world's first, or America's first, transcontinental railroad, which allowed millions of settlers to flow out west safely. Okay, railroads adopt rail time. This is time zones, basically. So we were having a problem where if you said the train was leaving from New Orleans at 3 p.m. and somebody in New York City was looking at that, well, because they're much farther to the east, that's going to be like, 4 p.m., okay, for them, or maybe 5 p.m. Well, no, it'd be about 4 p.m. So it's an hour off. And because of that, people were missing trains. Trains were colliding with each other because they thought the track was clear, and they went on the track even though they had somebody barreling towards them at 70 miles an hour. And so in order to stop all this from happening, we adopt rail time as a country. And that standardized all the times. We now have 4 time zones in the continental United States with different hours. All right, communication. Let's talk about these things, okay? Samuel F.B. Morse, 1830, makes the telegraph machine, okay? The telegraph machine uses a series of dots and dashes to spell out your ABCs, basically, and you have to know Morse code. That's the name of the code. And this made it possible to send a message instantly from one part of the country to another, saving you months of lag time in between messages. We have the typewriter. Christopher Sholes, 1867, excuse me. So for the first time now, you have something that is basically legible. All writing that uses a typewriter, you can read it, okay? And that's a massive bit of technology for us. People were dying left and right, especially in hospitals, because of doctors' bad handwriting. So getting the typewriter out there makes it where everybody can read everything pretty much. And it also gave women something to do for a job. So this combined with a safety bicycle, allowed women to get to work and to have something to do at work so they could get paid. We have the telephone that comes out years later, okay? And the telephone, fortunately, from Alexander Graham Bell, it uses the same lines as the telegraph, okay? The telegraph up here. So, as soon as the telegraph was made, we had to wire America up. We had to spend the next 40 years putting telephone wires everywhere. Well, it was telegraph wires. Well, the telephone uses the same wires. So as soon as the telephone is invented, we automatically have this network of lines going all over America. So the telephone actually grew much faster than the telegraph. Okay? All right, expansion of industry. Okay? Oil, folks. With the invention of, with the finding of oil, one part of oil is kerosene, and we needed something to replace candles, basically, and also oil from animals that we used to use as well, especially whale oil. So in the 1850s, we have Edwin Drake, who was the first person to successfully drill for oil, and now we have a good supply of kerosene. All other parts of the oil were simply dumped into the river, unfortunately, for the environment. John D. Rockefeller takes full advantage of this, and he organizes the oil industry to eliminate waste. And by the end of the 1800s, John D. Rockefeller owned or controlled 95% of all oil and gas. And he is definitely the richest of all the robber barons. If you account for his money today, if you account for inflation, John D. Rockefeller would have been the world's first trillionaire, which has not been beaten yet. Okay? So, electricity. Thomas Edison built the first large electric power plant in New York City after perfecting the incandescent light bulb. So, he makes up the light bulb. He also makes the first DC power plant, and he's going to try to market this to everybody in the world. Edison used direct current, but alternating current's ability to be shipped over longer distances caused the current war to be won by George Westinghouse and Nikola Tesla. So we have this thing called the current wars. Which one will we use? AC power, alternating current, or DC power, which is direct current? Well, it turns out because alternating current can actually be shipped over a longer distance without losing its charge, alternating current, it's much cheaper for people to produce, and so that's what we went with. We have steel. Okay, Henry Bessemer develops a new, inexpensive way to make vast quantities of huge steel. What you basically have to do is take iron, and you burn coal under the iron, and you melt the iron, and you get it up to about 2200 degrees, and then you blow hot air into it, which makes all the carbon in the iron float to the top. You scrape it off, and what you're left with is steel, okay? And a bridge builder named Andrew Carnegie decided he was going to become the steel robber baron. And so he made a new company called Carnegie Steel, which became the biggest company in the world. And it was later bought by J.P. Morgan and turned into a new company called U.S. Steel after that. By the way, it's recently been bought by the Japanese, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And it's gone. So, which change did not contribute to the expansion of American industrialization in the 1800s? Well, folks, looking at the options, settling the Great Plains has nothing to do with the cities industrializing, okay? These are all farmers. They're living out there with no electricity and very few resources as well. All right. In the United States, the second industrial revolution of the late 19th century contributed to a rise of big business and led to, let's see, I think this is it. Nope. No, it's going to be this one. Ethnic diversity. Increased ethnic diversity from an influx of immigrants. So the more factories we say this, the more factories that we have out there, the bigger the cities are, the more people want to come to make their part of the American dream.